All right, welcome everybody. I'm Ed Cruz, and today this is episode 68, holding structure. I don't know if that term is correct. I want to say holding structure, all right? But what I'm going to do is give you tips in the first section of Silam Tao, and exactly maybe give you a little bit of like referencing to know, am I actually holding the structure or doing this motion correctly? Okay. So in the first section of Silam Tao, you see us, right? You do Tanzao, right? And you go in the slow motion, going from the elbow out all the way to the maximum elbow in. And then you're like, okay, what is the thing? How do I know I'm doing this right? Right? I think that's what really comes to mind. And when people have to think, it's like, it looks like what you did, I think. I don't know if it feels like it should be. What should it feel like? What does it mean to hold the structure, right? I mean, if I hold my hand like this, is this a structure? Notice how my hand moves back. Or if I hold my hand like this, and the next thing I have is tense up. So what I want to do is give a little tips as far as what you should be feeling. And so in reference, when you actually are by yourself or trying to self-correct and stuff like that, you have a reference then, okay? So for example, if you hold your tanza like this, right? Let's use the visual, because sometimes the feel is a little difficult to understand, but the visual, we have to know. Notice there's some key components when we do this. The shoulder can't be up, right? It has to be relaxed, stretching all the way down. From the stretch of the shoulder, the elbow sinks, right? The elbow sinks. Stretch, sink. Now from here, the tanzao, flat, right? Like basically here, give me money, flat. So notice, this is a basic structure that you need to hold that. You have to stretch the shoulder, sink the elbow, flat the wrist, and then basically point to the target with the index and thumb. So visually, it's not everything that you need right now, but if you look in the mirror when you're training, it's like, well, does it look like that? Okay, it looks like that. So right there, you can use that as a reference for us. You know, when you're trying to find someone, you try to copy them, you're like, does it look kind of like that? Okay, I think it looks like that. Okay, so let's start off with that first. Have that visual look of what structure looks like when holding your tongue. Okay, so not perfect, but somewhere to begin with. So now that we have the visual look of tanzao, what should it feel like? So I have no one to help me here. I use myself. Notice I grab my arm, and then all of a sudden I pull back into me, right? I pull back into me. So I pull back into me, and to hold this position, right? Let's say I want to be aiming at this target, hold this current position. I don't want this position to go like this. If I pull back into me, what do I feel? So when I pull back with my right hand, my left hand, next thing I know, I was like, oh shoot. I feel this part getting tighter, or this part getting tighter. I feel almost like it's clenching, like I'm squeezing in order to hold that structure. So in other words, I'm here and I feel myself gripping. I can actually feel, think of it this way, to hold a structure like this is enough. Any additional 0.01, 0.05, whatever, 1% of muscle that you add onto it to hold the structure, that's actually muscle. And that's not exactly what you want to feel. So you may not be able to feel it. Like, for example, if I use 10% muscle, I'm like, I won't, in the beginning, you don't even realize that's muscle, right? And you're like all happy, I'm holding it. But the teacher goes around and is like, yeah, that's a lot of muscle. It's like, what? I don't feel anything. That's okay. You're not going to feel it. But let's say at that level, you can't feel 10%, but at 20% use of muscle, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I see what you're saying. I feel that clenching or that tightness in my hand in order to hold that. So when I pull back, I feel a squeeze or I feel some tightness here, here, here. That's your first rule of reference as far as that maybe you are using muscle in order to hold that particular structure. So just a guide to understand exactly. You want to visually look for that positional hold. You want to feel, are you squeezing that and so forth? Because at the end of the day, the feel and the hold of the structure, when I pull this back, right? Okay, when I pull this back, if my body goes like this, see how my arms go like this? That's wrong too. I want to feel when this goes here, stretch, and I sink. When I pull this arm back, I'm not pulling it down to me, I'm just simply pulling back like I'm pulling a rope. When I pull this here, the force basically goes onto the elbow, right? It should go to the elbow. If it goes like this is not stretching. This This has to stretch in order for this to sink. So when I pull this back, this goes straight down to my elbow. That's what you should feel. Okay? Now, if you pull it back a little, and notice my hand doesn't collapse in like this. Basically, I almost ask you to cast a mold of the current position you have. If your hand goes like this, off. You want to hold it in place, pull. Next thing you know, you feel it down to the elbow. It's like, oh, I don't feel it here or here. It feels like it's going down to my elbow. What kind of black magic is this, right? So you feel it down to your elbow area, and you're like, I don't feel any squeezing here or here. I'm still aimed at the target, and it's going down to my elbow. And now all of a sudden, you have your first sensation and realization of a structural hold, okay? Now, you don't have to give it that much force to be able to feel it go down to your elbow like that. If per se you pull it further down, right, further down, and then if you, all of a sudden you're pulling more, right? Pulling more, and then the muscle's tightening, right? Use this elbow and then sink it down, and you'll notice now you'll feel it going down to your stance, right? Okay, so I want you to play around with this, see if you can actually do it. First, if you're holding it, pull a little and you see if it goes directly down to your elbow area. Now, if you pull back a little more and you start feeling this tightening, you're like, okay, it's not working. What am I doing wrong? Why is that not working correctly, right? Well, when it starts to feel like it's going more, sink the elbow. Literally, when this pulls, when you pull in, this elbow sinks, sink it more. Now, next thing you know, when you pull in, it's going down to the ground. Not necessarily to go that hard. It's just a little understanding that when force comes to any point of touch, eventually you go down to the ground. That's why the stance has to be so good. The vertical has to be in place. And how you're holding it is center of gravity is exactly in the center. So not necessarily to go hard, it's just a reference to exactly feel it. The overall result that I want you to get is when I pull back a little, I don't feel the squeeze here. I see a little, I don't feel a give like this. There might be a little motion like this, so it goes down to the elbow area. And that's your first beginning leap or step into the world of actually holding structure with the minimal amount of muscle necessary. So that works the same way when you do wusao, right? If I do wusao and pull, right? You can do it two ways actually. Pull wusao or push wusao, and the same thing occurs. If I feel myself pulling, I feel this tightening. What happens? Sink, stretch, sink. If I push this in, this tightens in, stretch, sink. Let it go down to the elbow area first. And it's not perfectly how you should do it, but it's a beginning step in understanding how to hold structure without actually using muscle, okay? Same thing with futsal and so forth. So without diving in deeper into this subject, for now use that as a reference to get yourself on the path of actually learning how to hold structure in the first section, okay?